Meanwhile, former President Trump pleading not guilty yesterday to 4 federal charges in special counsel Jack Smith's January 6th investigation. Trump slammed the indictment. Watch.
This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America.
Joining me right now, attorney and former NYPD inspector Paul Mauro. Paul, great to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Give us your assessment of all of this.
Well, in reading through the indictment, the first thing that occurred to me, the first word that occurred to me is insubstantial, okay? And one of the tells on that is when you look at the masthead of an indictment or any charging document, when you see a lot of the following words, attempt, conspiracy, it's a little bit of a tell. And what that means is that we actually don't have a completed crime. An attempt means you tried. Conspiracy means a couple of people, at least 2, got together, formed a plan to commit a crime, and then one of them took a step. So in looking at this, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of meat on the bone here. However, there is one area where we do get beyond the idea that maybe they did do something substantial that could be characterized as an act. That resides in the area of these electors, the scheme where they supposedly were going to try to present fraudulent electors, that's the language of the indictment, to the Senate and try to quote-unquote create chaos in the Senate. The problem with that is that even under the logic of the indictment and accepting that analysis, Donald Trump is not articulated as the one responsible for it. Instead, it looks like, the way it's written, that his co-conspirators are. And I think that's also a tell. That's one of the reasons why you're hearing from his attorney that they're going to be looking at Donald Trump's attorneys at the time as part of his defense. But it also tells me that if they had it, they would have put it in there. If they had a smoking gun that Donald Trump said, yes, fraudulent electors, let's go with that plan, shoot that stuff into the Senate, they had that, it would have been in there, and it's not. So that looks to me like pressure. And that tells me that one of these co-conspirators may be online here, maybe in the sights of the prosecutors for a flip. And that's my read. It almost looks like, if we accept the idea that the elector scheme is the most substantial, maybe the only substantial aspect of this, it looks like they arrested the wrong guy.
Wow. Well, look, the President Trump is his lawyers are supposed to go back now on August 28th. And at that time, we may get a date in terms of a trial. Paul, what's your take on how realistic a trial is before election 2024? I mean, isn't there a process where you have to do, discovery and depositions? And would that happen within a year?
Yeah, I think your antennae are firing off exactly accurately, Maria. I don't think that's going to happen. This is a very complex case. First of all, it's a very novel use of these statutes. I've only ever seen one of these statutes ever used, in fact, which is the defraud the government statute. And even there, we have, again, a conspiracy. And that takes you into a very arcane area. Aside from the fact that the statutes themselves are unusual and they're being used in a novel way, again, attempt, conspiracy, these are squishy circumstances. This is not, you have a dead body like you have in certain types of crimes where it's very apparent to a jury. This means you got to get into somebody's intent. You got to get into knowledge. You got to get into their minds. In this case, Donald Trump's mind. The great mountain that Smith has to get over here is the idea that Donald Trump did all of this with knowledge that what he was doing was fraudulent, that the election was a loss. And that's going to be tough to prove. What does that mean? A ton of discovery. Remember, they took the phones of at least 2 of Donald Trump's lawyers. They will have dumped those phones. All of that stuff now, which has been residing with the, let's call it a task force, because I'm sure Smith had plenty of people working with him, all of that stuff now has to be packaged up, sent over to Donald Trump's current lawyers. This is a legal boondoggle. It's going to take a while. There's going to be a lot of appeals. There's going to be interlocutory appeals, which means appeals that occur before we ever get to trial. And I think we can all sit comfortably because I don't see this happening before the election.
Wow. Meanwhile, look at what's going on the other side. The House Oversight Committee released the transcript of Devon Archer's testimony. This is Hunter Biden's former business partner. He testified that Hunter would look to use the brand. He's referring to the Biden brand, which is then Vice President Joe Biden, as defensive leverage to send the right signal to his foreign business partners, don't mess with us. When asked about using Joe Biden as the brand, Archer said, quote, we would discuss having an understanding of D.C., and that was differentiating component of us being able to raise capital. Paul, your reaction to the Devon Archer testimony?
Well, it doesn't sound to me like they spent 20 meetings talking about the weather, if that's what we're being asked to believe. I mean, that beggars belief, right? So, you know, what's interesting to me here in a macro sense is both sides are claiming they got what they wanted out of the Archer interview and the transcript. I would argue that it favors the Republicans because, first of all, you put Joe Biden at the scene and you're floating a theory of what went on that, it, again, just defies belief. The idea that they talked about fishing and how's the weather, you know, we got the vice president going to those meetings 20 times just to ask about these things. Why does he want to do that? But you know what, there's something else here, Maria. If you notice, the tactics, they've moved the goalpost. The tactics have changed. The Democrats now are circling around Joe Biden. It's almost as if they've come to a realization that Hunter is a lost cause. That had not been the case. Now, why is that really dangerous? Because Hunter Biden is the one that's looking at jail. Hunter Biden is the one whose plea deal just got blown up. Hunter Biden is the one for whom evidence is mounting. And, you know, to piggyback on your last segment, the CEFC Chinese deal is one of the places that there's real exposure for him. Patrick Ho, who was arrested by DOJ. Listen to this. While they were investigating Hunter Biden, DOJ arrested Patrick Ho. Patrick Ho was the point guy in CEFC who was negotiating with Hunter Biden. They put him in jail for a couple of years. It looks like he didn't even do the full term, and he goes back to Hong Kong. That's a guy that they should have put into the grand jury. They should have flipped him on Hunter. Reportedly, Hunter and his Uncle Jim came up on the wiretaps that they used on Patrick Ho. So I think behind the scenes, the Democrats understand Hunter's a lost cause. Build the moat in front of Joe, and let's try to survive this.
Well, I mean, how do you explain away all of this money that the Biden family took in and these gifts? Because what we're told is someone from CEFC sent, and this was in the laptop, sent Hunter Biden a diamond, a 3-carat diamond.
Right.
They also sent him money for a Porsche.
Right.
I mean, why? Why would you send the vice president's son these gifts? And what about the $17 million that James Comer identified? Or the Nancy Mace, the Oversight Committee member, told me she thinks it's upwards of $50 million, 50, that the Biden family took in from foreigners.
Listen, last I checked, the Chinese Communist Party was not that altruistic, okay? The idea that they were giving this away for Hunter's good looks, again, beggars belief. The person you're referring to regarding the diamond is Yang Jiangming. He is a known Communist Party cadre. Same thing goes for Patrick Ho. These guys were intel officers. I don't have to speculate on that. You know who said that Patrick Ho was, quote unquote, the spy chief of China? Hunter Biden. All right?
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing. And by the way, Patrick Ho got arrested by DOJ for doing exactly what he was trying to do with Hunter Biden in 2 African countries, Chad and Uganda. He was doing it here in New York through the UN, but it happened here in New York. He was trying to get oil deals with them for the purposes of influence. They arrested him on it while he was doing the same thing with Hunter. And yet somehow or other, nobody seems to put those 2 pieces together. And so, again, the idea that they're getting diamonds, they're getting millions of dollars, who knows? I mean, even Hunter couldn't smoke that much crack. Where's that money?
Wow. You know, the Wall Street Journal and Kim Strassel did a great, well, it's the editorial board, did a couple of op-eds this morning. Devon Archer's full Biden story. Kim Strassel also writes, there's one thing to make relationships while in office and then do business once you're out of office, which is what she says Jared Kushner did. There's another thing to actually profit on the name while you're in the White House, which appears to be what the Bidens have done.
It certainly does. And again, I go back to just Hunter's own statements that they've taken out of the laptop and all the stuff that's recorded on their communications that are recorded on there. He talks about the fact that, well, I got to be careful of a FARA violation here. you know, we might have to register as foreign agents, etc. I'm dealing with the spy chief of China, but he never does anything about it. He himself, he's aware. That's a situation where somebody can never claim that they were unaware of what they were getting into, because his own words have put him in it. And I go back again to this mountain of evidence that we have. Patrick Ho was wiretapped, apparently. Where is that material? Did it go into this investigation of Hunter Biden? Because when Patrick Ho got arrested, the first person he called was Jim Biden. And when they asked Jim Biden about it, he told the New York Times, oh, I think he meant to call Hunter. So the whole thing is shady.
Yeah, and we still need to know what went on with Ukraine as well, because those WhatsApp messages are also quite telling. Paul, it's great to get your insights on all of this. Thank you.
Thank you.